From Prairie Lodge, this is the Sun City Report, a program to keep you up to date on what's happening in Sun City, Huntley. Your host is your fellow Sun City resident, WGN's Orion Samuelson.
Well, neighbors, hello again, and welcome to the July edition of Sun City Report. I'm Orion Samuelson, and when you don't see me here, I hope you hear me on WGN Radio Chicago. But it's always enjoyable to learn more about the community in which I live and to share that with you, with some very special guests. On this edition of Sun City Report, we're going to talk business, but then we're going to talk fun. We're going to talk entertainment, musical entertainment. But before we do that, let's take care of business and say hello to Dennis O'Leary, who is on the Finance Committee at Sun City. And before we talk about that, though, a little bit about your background, Dennis. What were you doing and where were you before you settled here in the neighborhood?
Well, I lived in Rockford, Illinois, and I worked for an aerospace company, a company that build equipment for most of the airlines that are in business today. And I retired from there about 7 years ago. Looked for a community that had some adults that might have a little free time, and Sun City seemed to fill the bill.
And I did discover we do have something in common because you worked in the agricultural equipment industry for a while.
I did for about 6 years. I worked for GI Case over in some of the Iowa plants.
All right. So now let's talk budgets and finance committee. I've already learned from you that you're not a member of the board and you don't have to be. So tell me about the finance committee and its makeup.
Well, the finance committee is made up of 7 individuals. And those individuals are selected by the committee members, but they are approved by the board. So you have to provide the committee the qualifications that you have to fill a position on the board. And once the committee interviews you, then the board has to approve that assignment.
And how long is the term?
The term is for 2 years. It can be renewed for 2 more years, so a total of 6 years.
6 years. So now let's talk about, well, first of all, this is a budget for who?
This is a budget for all of Sun City.
Okay.
And it includes both the APNs, and there's 8 of those, and it includes the association. And we do budgets for both of those entities, the APNs and the association. We have a reserve budget, an operational budget, and a capital budget for the association. And we have reserve budgets and operational budgets for the APNs. So essentially, every year we do about 19 budgets.
And those funds come from?
Most of it comes from our assessments. But we do have income, from the trips that we take, from some of the charges for the presentations, for the shows that we have, things of that nature do bring in some funds.
And then where do the funds go? What's your biggest area of expenditure?
Well, probably landscaping would be the biggest area. We spend about $12 million a year in a budget, and about $3 million of that goes to our landscaping throughout. The rest of it is kind of broken down by salaries, which is one of the next biggest chunks, and we also have this fund that we call the reserve fund that we have to keep putting money into, and it is used to repair the facilities. So right now, the facility, as new as it is, there hasn't been too much of that. But the parking lot is a classic example. That's going to be about $1.2 million. We have to put money away every year, so we have that available when these kind of projects come up.
So when do you put the budget together, and how do you put it together?
Well, it's it's kind of a long process. We begin the process in July, and that begins with the board establishing some guidelines for the budget. And they identify the direction that they want the budget to go in and give us some guidelines as to what they expect out of the budget. Then the First Services staff begins the process by developing a budget proposal. They put together a proposal based on last year's budget, the 6 months, up until July budget that we're working on, and try to project what the next year will require. Is there going to be an increase in some of the things that we have to pay for? Will there be a decrease? Can we save some money? We expect them to work on those issues and have that prepared. At that point, the management here at First Services takes a look at that budget and they try to decide, does this make sense? Does it fit with what the board has requested? And they'll eventually pass that along then to the Finance Committee.
And when is the budget presented formally then?
Well, generally in November, the Finance Committee will have reviewed the budget enough to call for a meeting of the board and the Finance Committee, where the Finance Committee will share the budget that is proposed at that point in time. Now, it won't necessarily be new to all of the board members. Some of the board members participate in some of the meetings that we have with the directors of the First Services staff. Some of them don't feel they need to. They might have knowledge in that area, and so it's not necessary. But lately, more of the board members have been involved even in some of the early stages of that presentation.
How much input do you get from residents? Do you hear from them?
Well, we are all residents.
Right. Yeah.
And quite frankly, we hear plenty during the year, especially when the assessment information comes out.
Right.
So we do have input from them. We also have input from other committees, and that's one of the areas that we have been working on recently, is to have some of the other advisory committees a bit more involved in the budget, so that input could be available. And then there is a point in time where the board has a meeting with all of the residents and shares what the budget is all about and takes questions relative to that budget. And so at that point in time, we do get some input. Also, by that point in time, though, generally, the board has been very involved in what the budget's going to look like. The Finance Committee has become very involved. A lot of the things have already been determined, but it's certainly open to question by the residents. And if there are issues that appear need to be addressed, they will be addressed before the budget becomes final.
And who has the final vote on the budget?
The board, period. They are always responsible. They always have the authority to change the budget. They have, over the last few years, they have really dedicated themselves to the time it takes to review budgets. And so they are very knowledgeable, and they are the ones that make the final determination as to what the budget will be.
And one final quick question. If anyone is interested in becoming a member of the Finance Committee, where do they go?
Well, first of all, they have to fill in a form that all committee members have to fill in, and it's turned over to Bill Panock. Bill, I'm not sure to what extent he reviews that, but he does review it, and if there is a reason that that person maybe should not serve, he would advise the committee. Generally speaking, those forms that are filled out, which essentially is kind of a resume,
right,
are passed along to the committee. The committee will take a look at that. They'll take a look at the qualifications and determine whether or not that person really fits the need for the committee. The committee, for example, I am an operations guy. The committee has a lot of finance folks, but they're looking for a little diversity on some of these committees. And so even at times, a qualified person might be asked to wait a bit because there's maybe somebody with a more diverse background that might fulfill the need in that committee.
Well, as a resident, thank you for your service, and thank you to your
bet.
committee members.
Thank you, Orion.
It's been a pleasure learning about the budget process here at Sun City. Dennis O'Leary, the Finance Committee, and we'll be back to talk some entertainment when we continue on this edition of the Sun City Report.
This has been the Sun City Report. Your host has been WGN's Orion Samuelson.